Welcome to our weekly tea broadcast where we drink some tea together in quiet and then have a little chat, talk about some Zen and tea and other life matters. We're going to start as usual with 3 bowls of tea in silence. I hope you're safe and happy and sound where you are and you have some good tea to join in and drink along with us. So I hope that was nice. My 3 bowls were very nice. Before we start, a couple of announcements. They're really just one announcement, separated into 2. Firstly, this will be the last weekly live broadcast for a little while. I don't know how long. Maybe we'll start again in August or at the end of this month. But the reason that we won't have one next week or at least for a few weeks is because we have our first ever online course. So if you're new to tea or you already have a tea practice, you want to deepen it, we have this online course from the 18th to the 24th for 1 week. And it's set up in a really epic fashion so that you can digest it in any way that suits you. So when you sign up for the course, you'll get access to the course for a month. So we'll be broadcasting for 2 hours a day for those whole 7 days, but then we'll be putting up better quality video than the live broadcast onto the course website. And that version, so we'll have like 2 cameras running basically, and so that version will stay there for the whole month. And then there'll be forums to discuss the topics in the teachings. There'll be supplementary materials, and I will give voluntary homework. So if you want to turn this into a week-long retreat of tea or a month-long retreat of tea, you can, and digest it however you like. So you could show up for the live videos. That might not be ideal in your time zone. Then you just watch the recording. You can engage with the forum. The forums will be moderated throughout the whole month, so you'll be able to have discussions and ask questions. And so I need some time to more deeply prepare for that. I've already been preparing for a couple months, but I want to take the week and a half, at least 10 days or so leading up to the course. I want to focus on that, and then the course will be going on. So that's why no more broadcasts for a while. I'll pause in these broadcasts to get ready for the course and then obviously conduct the course. So if you haven't signed up, I suggest you do. And it's thutcourses.com. We'll put the link below. Go ahead and sign up. It's quite affordable as well. And we have some new tea sets for beginners that are discounted on our Global Tea Hut website as well, including bowls and tea, or bowls of side handle and tea, or bowls side handle and a kettle and tea. And they're all discounted, so you could get one of those sets also if you don't have some of the teaware you'll need for the course. The course is going to be focused on Cha Dao, this course. So it will be oriented towards integrating tea into a practice in your life, including all the practical knowledge you need to get started or deepen your practice, and also some then general life wisdom and architecture to kind of surround a tea practice and contextualize it, etc. And I am conscious that a lot of people taking this course have taken courses before. In tea, we try to practice the beginner's mind, the I don't know mind, so 1 to 10, 10 to 1, so it's always good to go back to the beginning. And yet, I promise that if you are a more seasoned tea drinker, an older student, you will find this course very refreshing. There will be, first of all, new material that you've never heard, and second of all, even the material that you have heard, I'm making an effort to reframe it and teach it in a slightly different way, which is helpful. Sometimes receive the same teachings in different ways. They kind of land differently. So the organization of the course, the outline, the structure, the manner in which the old teachings will be given, all of it will have, to some extent, a very new, fresh face. So it is worthwhile to take it, no matter where you are. And depending how successful this is, we're thinking about doing another online course later in the year on Gong Fu tea. So that would be exciting as well. So no weekly broadcasts for a little while, sadly, because I've enjoyed these times to sit and share tea technologically with you. And we've been having discussions about Buddhist slogans, which I keep saying I like for this context, because they're not sequential, so you don't have to watch the previous broadcast to work with the slogan that we're talking about in this one. Also, these slogans are pithy, and so they are open-ended. They are questions. They are meant to be chewed on, drunk, digested, explored. I can't possibly unpack them in a few minutes. And I like that because I feel like my role as a Zen teacher isn't to give answers, but to give questions. I don't want to be the answer or the authority on anything. I want to invite exploration, catalyze transformation, your transformation of yourself. So I like that these slogans have all kinds of ways of interpretation and ways of understanding and exploring and questioning and relating them to your own life way beyond the explanations that I'm giving here. And in that way, you can take them to the bank after this video is over. So I like that format. I like that possibility of open-endedness. In fact, I think most of these slogans not only reach off in infinite directions of understanding and exploration and questioning, they also reach beyond the conceptual. So potentially you could travel with them to a non-conceptual place, a mind beyond separation. So for today's, it's a little different. It's not a slogan, it's more of a story. Today's, though you could make a slogan out of the end of the story, the line at the end of the story, and people have made a slogan out of it. So it is kind of a slogan, but the slogan doesn't make sense unless you know the story. So it's a short story, but the story goes that a wealthy merchant in Japan had his first grandson, and he was super stoked about this. He was very happy, and being a devout Buddhist, he went to a famous Zen master and calligrapher and said, "I would like to commission a piece of your calligraphy." He also wants to donate to the temple, of course, to honor the birth of his grandson. So he says, I want you to come up with a poetic phrase that expresses the best possible outcome for me, my son, and my grandson. The best possible end. The best possible outcome. And, you know, like many of us, when you go to a Zen teacher and ask for anything, you often get something unexpected, or you bite off more than you could chew, or you get something weird that doesn't make sense. Or you just get something maybe that forces you to look, first of all, at what you're asking, and second of all, at who is asking, and third of all, at the world that question is being asked in. And so that's what happened. When the merchant came back a couple of weeks later to get his scroll that expresses the best possible outcome for him, his son, and his new grandson, the scroll that he was handed in very beautiful script said, "Grandfather dies, father dies, grandson dies." And of course he was furious. What? This is a curse. This is not a blessing. I told you the greatest possible end for the blessed birth of my grandson. And he took the scroll and kind of stormed off. And they say some years later, after he had meditated on that scroll a bit more, he came to understand that the monk had honored him. That the scroll was the best possible outcome. Because the best possible outcome for a grandfather, his son, and his grandson is grandfather dies, father dies, grandson dies. Because what that means is that all three have longevity. they die in the natural order. Right? Nobody dies out of turn. That is the best outcome, because that means they all live long lives. That means the father outlives the grandfather, and the grandson outlives his father, and they all live on longer than the previous generation, which isn't guaranteed. So that is a very blessed outcome for 3 generations. The most blessed outcome. He used that word end, right? If he had said, like, I want to scroll about my grandson's awakening, he would have gotten a different scroll. But he said the best possible end. That is the best possible end. And so you could make a slogan out of this. Grandfather dies, father dies, grandson dies. But it doesn't make sense unless you really have the story to back it up. And this slogan unpacks a lot and goes off again in 20 directions. I'm only going to talk about 2. You're free to explore it however you like. The first is, of course, impermanence. Just recognizing that this universe is constituted through and through, from its smallest subatomic particles all the way up to supernovas and giant gaseous planets. Everything is moving. Everything is changing. Everything is flowing. Everything is never the same twice. Everything is constantly moving, and everything is constantly dying and being reborn, not just at the end of life, but actually, the Buddha said, even trillions of times a second. If you think about it, like all the atoms swirling in us and subatomic particles. I'm not the same person I was 7 years ago. Not a single cell is the same. And my mind certainly is not the same. And so this impermanence is a fundamental truth in this world, as is death and the transformation of death and what that allows. We often think of death and life as opposites, but that's actually not true. The opposite of death is birth, not life. Life is permanent throughout death and birth. You survive every day because of the death of other beings. Every time you breathe, every microscopic beings are killed, and you, of course, eat food that comes from the death of other things. And when you look at a dead body in nature, it's actually covered in life. It will be covered in bugs and insects and fungus and all kinds of things eating it. So life is not the opposite of death. Life travels through both of these. But death and birth are flowing opposites of this. And this grandson and father and grandfather, this is the birth and death. But the life is flowing through both of that. And so this impermanence our relationship to it can be one of the great sources of either liberation or suffering in our life. It's a fulcrum on which a big part of our awakening hinges. So a big part of the difference between the suffering of sleep and ignorance versus awakening hinges on one's psychologically constitutional relationship to impermanence. If your relationship to impermanence is disharmonious or unrealistic, you will have a tremendous source of toxicity. Whereas if your relationship to it is healthy and aligned, you will have a tremendous source of awakening and wisdom. So impermanence is really a fulcrum for life wisdom, and it's really essential. On it, all freedom hinges. All awakening hinges on it, because if things weren't constantly changing, freedom wouldn't be possible. If things were stuck on immovable tracks that you couldn't get out of, then we would be stuck on an immovable track of ignorance forever. Yeah. But because everything is made through and through of impermanence, their liberation is possible. So liberation isn't possible without fundamental impermanence. So it's a great fulcrum, but it goes easily the other direction. Your relationship to that change can cause great suffering. Which brings us to the second aspect of this story and slogan that I'm going to unpack. There are many more, which is attachment. So attachment is, in essence, another way of putting that unhealthy relationship to impermanence. Wanting what is to be is not, wanting what is not to be is, attaching to things to try to prevent them from changing. And they're, in that way, resisting the way that things are. This is a big one. And it may seem from the outset, and many people scratch their head if they aren't really, if they're treating Buddhist thought as like just a philosophy or an argument, a game of like conceptual chess, and not as a practice. There can be a lot of misunderstanding when it comes to this teachings of attachment, because it can feel almost unnatural for a human to not be attached to what we love, especially. But that, this is why I side with the Buddhist scholar, famous Buddhist scholar, great scholar, D.T. Suzuki, who talked a lot about how it's misleading to either study or read the studies of any religion written by someone who isn't practicing that. On the one hand, he's not saying don't write such studies or don't read them. Actually, they can be helpful also if you're a practitioner, because they give you like an outside perspective and maybe show you foibles, problems, and help you laugh at yourself, or all kinds of other things. They can provide just context and another way of looking. It's kind of like I didn't really understand what it meant to be American until I traveled around the world and lived elsewhere and saw America the way that other people from elsewhere in the world see America. It's like you see your own culture from the outside, you understand a lot more about it. So studies about Buddhism from non-Buddhists is helpful, but only so far, because talking about concepts that aren't experientially ingrained in a practice, it's really should go the other way. It's like the old, there's a Native American kind of shamanistic saying, which is that once you have the power, you can easily get the knowledge, but knowledge without power doesn't heal anything. So it's that kind of, that analogy works a little bit. So it can seem unnatural to be non-attached. We use non-attached as opposed to the word detached. That's just semantic. It's to prevent us from thinking of non-attachment as like a pushing on anything, and just instead of just a letting go. And you think, but from the outside, from an ordinary kind of, quotidian mind, it may seem like, how could a human not be attached? How can we not be attached to what we love? And if you love something, isn't that to be attached? But actually, the deeper that you go, the more you understand something very powerful, which is that the attachment always pollutes the love. Because attachment is a filter through which the love has to pass through, and that filter contains, first of all, separation, and second of all, self-interest. And so all love is warped by self-interest and selfishness and a sense of separation, me loving you, subject and object. And so this is why the Buddha said all love with attachment eventually turns to its opposite. That doesn't mean permanently turns to its opposite, but it means that when you love with attachment, there's going to be periods of conflict in that relationship. When you love another human being or another thing, but let's just take human beings as an example, with attachment, there's going to be hate in that relationship, because the love is filtered through self-interest, separation, and selfishness. And so those things will pollute it. So actually, when we let go of attachment, it allows us to express our real Buddha nature, which is pure love. A love of, like we spoke about last week, you fluff your own pillow in the night, as Dogen said, right? A love of connection, of oneness, that free of self-interest, selfishness, and a sense of separation. Separation is not real, but we have a real sense of separation. Even though separation is not real, the sense is. So you're actually only able to express love in its pure form without attachment when you let go of the sense of separation and the selfishness and self-interest that are inherent in it, and just let the love express itself. So attachment is not it's not a necessary evil or something that has to be there if you're to love something. And being non-attached is not being an uncaring, cold, unviable being. It's actually the opposite. The more enlightened beings that I've met in my life who are far less attached than I am, far less stuck than I am, radiated more love. In fact, the amount of love and caring and they were able to project was precisely commensurate to the non-attachment that they had cultivated in their life. If you want a really good example, we can pray for him. He's obviously not in good health. Thich Nhat Hanh, for me, is a public example of someone that just radiates love. I've been in his presence. It's actually very, very strong. On a physical level, for me, that may sound foo-foo, but it really, he's a very strong and yet very non-attached. So my experience is that actually the less attachment, the more love can be channeled through, and you get to understanding of, expressed quite eloquently and beautifully and poetically by the late Leonard Cohen, also a Zen practitioner, if not master in his own right. Now that he's gone, we can say that. But he says, I am not the one who loves, but it's love that seizes me. So that you begin to understand that love is not something that you create or possess, but something that in some mystical disembodied version seizes you. That's Buddha nature. So the less attachment, really, the more you're able to effectively care and concern yourself. And effectively is an important word, because if you're attached, it's difficult to be effective. It's difficult for a doctor to treat, for example, someone he has a personal relationship with and is maybe too concerned. He has to stay clear in order to do his job effectively. So I think this story talks deeply about these two things, about attachment and about the natural order of death and birth and the life that flows through it, and the impermanence that is such a crux, such a hinge on our awakening or our ignorance. There's obviously much more in this slogan as well. So we can have some questions now.
So, question about this: how to let go of attachment and love unconditionally?
The unconditional love kind of catchphrase, it for me is not native language, I guess, and so I struggle with it. But how to let go, I think all of spiritual cultivation is really about letting go. I don't think what my journey has been about anyway is becoming something or adding something to myself, but rather allowing the nature of me to shine through, allowing my true nature to be itself, to be me. And so as opposed to becoming something, it's a lot about letting go and allowing what is already there to shine through. So, for example, let's take a small example of that. These bodies are designed actually to live with open and radiant senses. Our ancestors, both hominid and pre-hominid, lived in a world of predators. And actually, there is some evidence that the evolution of higher consciousness, there's some evidence, this is just a theory, it's not fact, but there's some evidence that the evolution of higher consciousness isn't possible for apex beings. It has to be near the top of the food chain, but not the top. In other words, the evolutionary pressure that created our intelligence comes from both from being above a lot of organisms in the food chain, but also below others. You got to kind of be sandwiched in the middle and have that evolutionary pressure on both ends to create this intelligence. The work towards this end created a lot of our tool making and our thinking and stuff, but like you also have to have that predator that's creating the awareness and so in other words, apex animals can become kind of lazy and they don't change much evolutionarily as a result. They can get, I guess, kind of stuck in a form because their form's very effective at what they do. And so being hunted is a part of like the pressure that created us as we are. And so our ancestors were like, boom, they were, constantly aware of everything around them, like a deer or whatever, and had to be able to smell a mushroom and know if it's the edible kind or not. And all of that's still there. It doesn't require training. What's lost is nothing. It's just that there's noise in the way. Mental noise and external noise. So there's noise in the way, and when you get rid of that noise, things heighten up. So when you let go, a lot of things just become apparent. And the how to let go, it takes no energy actually to let go. It takes a lot of energy to like twist a rope up and hold it. It takes a lot of energy to maintain this false structure, mental structure called an ego, a sense of separation. Letting go it doesn't require any energy other than letting go. If you want a more practical answer, then we come back to the 3 wonderful spiritual techniques that you can make use of. They're all great. They all 3 have wonderful merits, and they're all so useful. You can choose between meditation, or meditation. So, meditation and letting go, and other tools as well. More contemplation, wisdom, study of sutras, perspective, bigger perspective, etc. There's many ways to do this, but ultimately, letting go doesn't really require any energy. Just need to exhale. So I think that's applies to so many aspects of spiritual cultivation. I'm personally, at least in my journey, I'm not training to become something. I'm a Buddha, and that's all I really want to be. And I want to be myself fully, and naturally, spontaneously, openly. And in all the ways that it means to be a Buddha, in the way that I twirl the universe, but also in the way that the universe twirls me. I want to be myself. And so, in order to be myself successfully, I don't need to become myself. I already am myself. I need to let go of the things that are not me, basically. It's another way of thinking about it.
A question from Mario. How to deal with or overcome laziness on the path of self-cultivation?
how to overcome laziness on the path of self-cultivation. Well, laziness, sleepiness, this is what's called a nirvana, an enemy of the meditator. It's one of the 5 enemies the Buddha spoke of 2,500 years ago. So you're not alone, brother. It's an enemy of everybody every time, right? It's just there. For me, I work with kind of a 2-tiered affirmation. This is the best advice that I can give you quickly about this. There's a lot of habits. I think small incremental change, don't underestimate how powerful that can be over time. How a commitment to like meditate 5 minutes more each week will within a year very quickly get you to the 2 hours a day that you want. And so 2 hours might seem heavy, but 5 minutes a week is not. So small incremental change is good, but I'll give you also 2 affirmations. My 2 affirmations, and they're 2-tiered. The first is, I am free to X. And the second level is, I am free to enjoy X. I am free to meditate, and I am free to enjoy meditating. I'm free to exercise, and I'm free to enjoy exercising. And there is those things are pivotal, like, the negative limiting storylines are overcome with the first one. I'm free to exercise kind of disperses the negative limiting storylines that we write about, like I can't do this or can't do that. And then I'm free to enjoy it, because there is actually a point where you exercise every day and for enough days, and you will get to a place where sooner or later, it was later in my case, but you will get to a place where you miss it when it's not there, where you enjoy it. It's not a chore anymore. It's not something you have to do. It's something you get to do. And that is a possibility. So, and that is a much more healthy relationship to spiritual practice, as opposed to this like chore. It's not that. It's the way I want to live. It's my answer to the universe when the universe looks at me and queries, hey, what's it mean to be a Buddha? My answer is my practice. And so for me, it's the way I want to live. It's what I want to be doing. It's not what I have to do. Right? I meditate the way I listen to music, just because I love to. So I'm free to X, and I'm also free to enjoy X. Right? I'm free to exercise. Exercise is a harder one for me. I came from a lot of years of just meditating many hours a day and low metabolism, and I was getting fat and unhealthy. I needed to make movement, but it felt like a mountain. Every little step was like, it was just so hard and so much willpower, until I realized like that part of that was part of the problem, was my orientation towards it, which is kind of what I'm saying in this whole thing. Instead of orienting in a way where it was like, and like always having to dig down and pull up this like giant effort of will, I started, I'm free to X and I'm free to enjoy X, and I started kind of approaching it more like I'm a big fat geek. So I just started like approaching it like in a geeky way, like how do I figure this out? How do I figure it out so that I can enjoy it? And then being like, I don't enjoy that, and then eventually just finding that rhythm. And I got to the place where now, like, a week without exercise would really suck. I can go a day, but, 2 days, I don't like to go 2 days. And it's not because I have some goal or I'm trying to get like super ripped. I'm just exercising because I want to be a human who exercises, because it feels good to move your body and breathe better and be more healthy. So it's an orientation issue, right? So focus on the orientation, the attitude first. Don't underestimate teeny incremental changes that you can easily do. And get to that place where you enjoy doing it. And then there is also, look, for laziness, sometimes you just got to plant a sword. That's just a fact. Occasionally you got to just horse stance.
Angelica is asking, can you please share your writing process for finding the truest words? Also, a request for your next book to be on love and relationships.
So my next book is not going to be on love and relationships. I'm actually writing it right now. It's a sequel to Zen and Tea, One Flavor. Very different than the first book, but it's called Zen and Tea, Have No Flavor. And I'm about roughly halfway done. As for my writing process, the best absolute writing is the kind that just like is like involuntarily. It's like vomiting. It comes from the passion. It comes from the charge of the universe. It seizes you like love. It just pulls you, as opposed to something you do. I do some writing where I have to do it. I went, since tea medicine, I went like 2 years where all my writing was a chore. Because we have the magazine, so there's deadlines, and it's like, having to write. And then I had a big life change. I faced the death of a being I love very much. Some stuff all got shook up, and boom, this like passionate writing came in the aftermath of the metabolization of that grief, and started flowing and has been since, and that feels really good. But you can't really make that. It just kind of really flows, really moves through you. If you're interested, he's a Global Tea Up member, and the best book on writing I've ever read. What's the title of it? Ensouling Language. Check that out. It's by an author who actually most of his books are about plants and plant medicine, but then he has this one book about writing. I've read it several times. Connor's reading it now. That's why he knows the title, or he read it recently. So Ensouling Language is really wonderful. And the second very influential book on me, actually, believe it or not, was written by Stephen King. It's called On Writing. And it's more about fiction writing, but it has a lot of really good advice for writers as well. So it looks like that's it. No more questions. Thank you so much for sitting and sharing some tea and space with me. We'll see you in a few weeks. If you haven't already, sign up for the course. It's really going to be a wonderful, epic week of tea, or a month of tea if you want it to be. As again, these teachings they're going to be able to digest and integrate into your life in the way that you see fit. That's part of the benefits of an online course. There are actually detriments, of course. We're not sitting together and sharing tea. As this is the first online course for a reason. I've never done this because it's helpful to sit and share tea with those when we go over these ways of living and ways of practicing tea and understandings. So, but one of the great benefits of this forum is that it will be able to land and integrate into your life in the way that you see fit, because you have complete control over it. It's through your device. It's happening in your space, in your schedule, in your time. And we'll have the link below, so go sign up, and we'll see you there. If not, I'll see you on the other end of it. We'll eventually have broadcasts again for sure. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful, wonderful few weeks. Stay safe. Drink lots of good tea.